So we'll begin now with the Yoga Sutra. So maybe if you have a book on the Yoga Sutra, you can get this and read along. Otherwise, just listen and then read at some other time. So we begin with the first chapter of Samadhi Pada, the chapter on Samadhi. And what exactly Samadhi is, we will explore. But we begin at the very beginning with the first of the sutra, Atha Yoganuशासनम्. Now begins the exposition of the discipline of yoga. So we introduce, and the second sutra already is an explanation of what yoga is. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the cessation of the movements in our consciousness. And to understand that a little better, and to understand the following sutras a little better, let's do a little exercise for a moment. So if you can just sit in a meditation posture with your eyes closed and take about maybe 5 minutes, maybe more, maybe 10 minutes. Pause this recording when you're ready and sit with no thought. Keep all thoughts out of your head. Have your mind completely empty and calm with no thoughts coming in. So pause the recording now and do that for 5 to 10 minutes. So if you've done this exercise, very likely you will have noticed that it is an impossible task. So very likely there are thoughts coming in whether you want it or not. These are the fluctuations of the mind. They just happen and they are difficult to control. So now, again, pause this recording for a moment. Take your journal or take any pen and paper and see if you can write down these thoughts that kept coming in and categorize them. Can you put them into different categories? And again, so pause the recording now and see if you can categorize the thoughts that were coming into your mind. And so if you've done that, I have done this exercise the very first time when I learned it from my teacher, and I've done it a few times with groups. And so I'm not sure, there's different ways you could be categorizing, and I'm not sure which way you did it, but very likely it will be something like this. The thoughts that come into your mind either have to do something with something emotional, a personal issue, a subjective, emotional, personal thing that keeps creeping up. Or maybe it is not so subjective, but rather objective and thinking about truths or facts or something you're studying now in your philosophy classes. Then maybe you were thinking about the next dinner or what you're going to do tomorrow. So something to do with the future, something that hasn't actually happened yet, that exists in your mind only in form of imagination. And then maybe you were thinking about something that happened in the past, a memory. And often what happens also is that a heaviness or a dullness comes into the mind that is not the same as a calm mind, a calm or empty mind. It is just a very tired mind that wants to sleep. So whatever way you put it, you could have categorized it in your own way, but this is what it comes down to. These are the principles that these fluctuations can come down to. So if we skip a little bit ahead to Sutra 1.5, Vrittaya Panchataya Klishtaha. these fluctuations of consciousness are categorized into 5 categories. And they are natural categories, so that means they have their use, they have their place, but depending on how they come in or how well they are controlled, they can be useful or not so useful. If we want to sit in meditation and these thoughts keep coming in, then they are not so useful to us. So what are these 5 categories according to Patanjali? They are pramana, viparyaya, vikalpa, nidra, smrtayaha. Pramana, valid knowledge. Knowledge that we know, that is true, we have experienced. So it is the objective knowledge. But then also viparyaya, the contrary to that, the knowledge that is not the truth, that is not reflected by the truth, and that is colored by our own emotions. If we are involved in something, for example, if you have an ex-partner that you were hurt by, then your view of him or her is very likely to be colored by your own emotions, and maybe you see that person in a bad light a lot of the time, but of course it doesn't really reflect the truth. But it is a natural response to look at things around us through the filter of our own emotions. But it does mean that most of the time it means that we are not seeing down to the truth of the thing. Then the next category is vikalpa, imagination, something that's not really happening, maybe something that we think about in the future, something that we imagine, something that is just not reflected in anything real, but is in our imagination. Nidra, sleep, which is, it can be of course a good thing, it can be a state of emptiness in deep sleep, which is very rejuvenating. But if it comes in the wrong way or uncontrolled, and we just feel a heaviness or a tiredness or a dullness of the mind, then it is not very helpful to us. And smrtayaha, or memory, the things that come into our mind from the past. So these are the 5 fluctuations of the mind. And we go back now again to Sutra 1.3. What happens if we actually do manage to control those fluctuations? Tada drashtu svarupe vastanam. Then, when we manage that, the seer, or the soul that in us which actually is the witness to everything else, abides in its own true self. So we can be our authentic self without the colorations of our emotional involvements, or without the pull that our mind is giving us, and our mind is pulling us in all sorts of directions, as it is directed from deep inside our unconscious mind. The mind is a vast place. Not only the thoughts that we actually recognize in the mind are there, that's just, as you know, the tip of the iceberg, but the vast underground of our unconscious mind that contains all the programming of our childhood, of all our lives, our lifestyle, our genetics, and also of the karma of our past lives that have a complete hold and control over most of our behavior pattern and our view of the world. So really it is only when we manage to resolve those patterns, those programming patterns, and clear our mind, not only our thoughts on the surface, but all of our unconscious mind, then we can really and truly see things as they really are and be free from these graspings of our inner unconscious programming or karma. Sutra 1.4, Vritti sarupyam ittaratra. At other times, when we do see the world through our own fluctuations, then we also identify with these fluctuations. So it is like we see the world through colored glasses, and the color of our glasses is simply determined by our own past experiences. So it is, of course, if we have a very, just as an example, a very happy and safe childhood, and we are continuously told that we are wonderful and great, then this becomes one of our filters through which we see the world. We see the world as a safe place that looks after me and loves me and values me. And if on the other side I grow up maybe by a mother who rejects me for whatever reason, even unconsciously, a mother who is an unwanted pregnancy or even rape or something of the kind, no matter how she might try to, there might maybe be unconscious feelings of rejection that will cause certain programmings in our unconscious mind for the rest of our lives. And through this programming, we see the world in this light. The world will always then be a place that, at least to some extent, rejects us. And it becomes then our duty, our dharma, to resolve these fluctuations, these particular programming, these particular seeds of our karma. So we don't identify with them.